Okay, so welcome, Maria, and thank you for joining us today. As chairwoman of ecoDa, your insights are particularly valuable in helping us and also our members to understand the evolving dynamics of board governance across Europe. So today we'll be focusing on a key topic, board evaluation. So let's get started with the first question. So, from a European perspective, how can effective board assessment contribute to a stronger governance, especially given the rapidly evolving corporate landscape we are seeing today?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with Ira. Regarding board evaluation, I think it's a very valid instrument if it's properly applied to improve governance, to make sure that the board works in a very dynamic, consistent and competent way, and to identify strengths and weaknesses, particularly with reference to board dynamics, competences around the board, what is required, what is actually in place. I think you can identify gaps that can be addressed through an ad hoc action plan. Of course, in order this to happen, you need to have good tools and good governance of the process.
And then, as a final question, maybe looking ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, how do you envision or how do you see board assessment evolving, particularly in response to ESG imperatives, accelerating digital transformation, and also growing stakeholders' expectation here in Europe?
This is very important because as boards become more challenging, given the environment in which we operate, as you mentioned, geopolitical risk becoming maybe number one risk, transforming governance models around the world, transforming a digital transformation, cybersecurity, new risks, non-financial risks emerging. Then the valuation, it's a very important, it's going to become even a more important tool in order to address the weaknesses of the board, because a board is made of people and people can work very well, but can also be dysfunctional. So how do we address that? Through a very objective process, transparent and complete, with preference with the external advisor supporting and being really independent. This is an important concept, having external advisors that are not guided by other interests, such as maybe a headhunter sometimes, or other vested interests they may have in terms of consultancy, but strongly independent, with a strong commitment from the chair to apply the right methodology in order to get the real answers from the board and not just a compliance exercise. And the real answer at times can be delicate and difficult to approach because you may have people that are dysfunctional, you may have competence that are missing, so that will be important for the next board to address those gaps and making sure that the right competences will be around the table. You will have issues around board dynamics. You will have issues on priorities of the board, whether the board has dedicated enough time to the important challenges that we are facing. And sometimes this is the only way to find out that some members are frustrated because they don't think they are dedicating enough time to strategy, or they think that certain processes are not adequate, or certain decision-making processes are opaque, and so on and so forth. So I think this instrument will become more and more important to the extent that the board and the chair in particular, who is guiding the board, who is supporting the independent board members, who is listening to their requests, will engage in a serious exercise and will not be afraid of sharing some weaknesses, but just be engaged in addressing them with an action plan, which should take some time and should be well structured. So I see more and more commitment in the execution of the action plan being very important for the future, because only if you next year you assess that certain things have improved, that certain changes have been done, that certain issues have been addressed properly, then you can see a progress. And of course, governance is a dynamic process. It changes with different conditions. So we must be engaged, and we must solicit as independent board members the exercise, because it's the only way to speak the truth and to make sure that we are not there just to have formal responsibility, but we are addressing the real issues of the company, and we are working in the interest of the company. So I see this increasing, but of course it takes a lot of engagement by us as independent board members, and by our chairs and by the CEO as well, because there are many ways to somehow interfere or make sure, try to address this in a more formal and not substantial way.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspective, and I think it would be very interesting for our members also to see the result of the survey and to see how it resonates with what you've just shared.
Of course, the issues are many, so we have to be very concise, but I strongly suggest all board members to think seriously about this exercise. It's not a ticking box exercise. It's something very, very important. And also we should engage in time to discuss the results. I would never compromise on that. The discussion must be open, candid, and must identify the real issues. I mean, with in a very professional way.